Hey, shorties. Welcome, welcome. Good to see you. Thanks, Adam. Adam's backstage doing things for us magically. I wanted to not come up on screen for a moment because I wanted you to see the beautiful background that we have ready for this evening's live stream. So I hope you all appreciate how beautiful it is. And there in the far left of the screen is the lovely man who we are honoring tonight, Juston Root. It's good to see you. I'm going to say a few hellos before I bring our amazing guests up onto screen. Thank you, Adam, for making the backdrop. It's perfect. Who have we got? Darlene's in the house. Good to see you. Tim is here. Ernie Birdie. Rubicon. Reese. Turd Ferguson. Good to see you, my friend. Adam's here. Adam's backstage and front of stage. No, and in chat. So I'm sure most of us, all of us, have heard about the tragic shooting by Boston police officers of Juston Root. I personally am not as well informed as I would like to be, and that's what we're doing here. Hi, Ashley. Good to see you. I've got Jen Root backstage, Justin's sister, BEATRIZ, long-term viewer of Miss Shorty, and our friend of the channel, Jason Broyles, aka Not Haley Walbrecht. So I'm going to be kind of learning along with you all tonight because this is not okay. This is a Massachusetts thing. It feels like there's a lot of terrible, corrupt shit going on in Massachusetts. We kind of know that from the Karen Read case. Many more things have come out in the interim since Karen's trial was declared a mistrial. But Justin's case predates that. So I think without further ado, actually, before I go on, thank you, Ms. Turd Ferguson, for gifting 5 Shorty memberships. They're really lovely. And also, chat, we're not going to do this is not a night for bumpers and sound effects. So obviously this is like, that's it. We'll do that another time. But thank you, Turd. I really appreciate you. Thank you for building our community and welcome to the new members. So let me start with, I guess, the guest of honor. They're all honorable guests, but Miss Jen Root, thank you for joining us. Wait, what have I done here? Oh, there we go. Thank you, Adam. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Miss Shorty. Thanks for having me.
Hi. It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for through BEATRIZ, sort of agreeing to come on the channel and to share Justin's story with us. It's lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too.
Beautiful. I might bring BEATRIZ up next. Hi, BEATRIZ.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Shorties.
It's great to finally see both of your beautiful faces. It's quite the honor. So I mentioned backstage to the ladies that I'm feeling a little bit the weight of the, I guess, the importance of this conversation we're going to have. So forgive me if I get a little bit teary, and this is pretty dear to all of our hearts. When I mentioned last week on Friday night to my guest last Friday night, Jason Broyles, aka Not Haley Walbrecht, he immediately says, this is Justin's case. Justin's story is very true, very dear to his heart also. And so it kind of seemed like a no-brainer to me to ask you two, Jen and BEATRIZ, if you would be okay with Jason coming on live with us. And thankfully, you both said yes. So without further ado, again, hi, Jason. Good to see you.
Hi, everybody. It's really good to be here.
Hi, Jason.
Hi, Jason.
Hello.
So I guess, Jen, can we start? Can you tell us a little bit about your brother?
Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on the point where you said that you felt that this was very heavy. And because I've been living and breathing this for 5 years and it still feels like it happened yesterday, I sometimes realize when I've talked to people or something and shared something, when I talk, most of the time, I'm almost like in the mode of I'm sharing Justin's story and not necessarily really thinking about my brother who I love, So just so you know, so when I'm talking, I think sometimes I just don't want people to think that it's, that I don't have emotion about it.
I think we can all understand to some degree, not your lived experience, but needing to or being able to compartmentalize some things, because you couldn't continue fighting this fight on Justin's behalf if you were always in your emotions about it, right?
Right, exactly. So should I just tell you, where should I start with his
I
story?
think, could you tell us a little bit first about your brother? I would like that.
Oh yeah. So Justin was my little brother, but of course he was bigger than me. And he would always be like, Jen gets it done. So I'm like, man, he gave me a big job here on the planet to do. He was a performer. He wrote his own music, which he really fine-tuned in his later years. He made some CDs, and all around a great guy who was struggling with mental illness. And when you needed, medication management or, change in medication, whatever it may be, I would see my brother, pretty much not really be there anymore. I mean, he was there, but he wasn't there. And so, that's kind of an up and down for anybody who, has a loved one with serious mental illness. It can be a roller coaster ride, and you can have some great years and then you can have some bumps along the way. So Justin suffered from mental illness. So I would just say he was very friendly. He always took care of my mom. He did everything for her. And so now it all falls on me. And so, yeah. And anyway, my kids loved him and we miss him.
Yes. Can I ask what his mental health struggles were in particular, just to give the full context?
It's schizoid affective disorder. So for people who don't know what that is, it's kind of a combination between bipolar and schizophrenic tendencies. Like he would have the bipolar manic side, so you're very hyped up, you're going to like creative mode all the time, and then the schizoid, affective part was like the paranoia or a delusion, that sort of thing.
And so he had episodes of that, like you say. So he had phases of less intense mental health struggles, and then other times when he was more deep in it. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so can you give me and the viewers a bit of information about what happened and what led up to that fateful day, as far as you know?
So looking through his records, so he was a mass mental health patient for a very long time, and reading his, the notes from the doctors, his psychiatrist wrote on January 6th that he would be sectioned soon, and he was dead a month later. So that's the sort of unfortunate part where you have to meet a certain threshold where you're a danger to yourself or to others. And for someone like Justin, it's like, hello, if we're going that route, like, why should we wait until it's a total, explosion, where it's really off the rails? But you can't really, force anybody. So he was there meeting his therapist for an unscheduled visit. And I know that because she left a voicemail. And apparently he had met her a couple times at 60 Fenwood, which is Brigham and Women's. So for everybody to understand, Brigham and Women's Hospital has, at 60 Fenwood, their psychiatric department is there. And then across the street, just one building over, that's Mass Mental Health's outpatient. And then on the other corner, the other side of the building, that's FinFen, which is a residential program for people, some of which are struggling from mental illness. And then 20 Vining, there's another inpatient residential place for mass mental health patients. So it's a very highly dense population of people who are struggling with severe mental illness in that area. So this is why it's always been absolutely shocking that my brother was at a hospital and needed to be hospitalized. He needed help. And what he got was bullets. He got people who didn't say some things that they should have and shouldn't have said some things that they said. And it escalated. So Juston arrived there on Friday, February 7th, 2020, around 9:12 a.m. He must have circled, but anyway, once he came around, he went into the 15-minute parking, and there was a security guard on the sidewalk, pretty much the back of his car, but far enough that he was on a walkie-talkie. He was calling in another car. He wasn't calling in Juston's car because he just arrived. But Juston, I can only assume that he was thinking, I'm going to be getting sectioned here. Why is he on the walkie-talkie? He was already like hyped, like what is going on? So he got out of his car, non-confrontational, went up and talked to the security guard. Very close, by the way, very close. I almost was like, did they even know each other? Because my brother was the type of person, he felt like he was part of the world police. He felt like he loved law enforcement. He, so I just find it, my brother's down there 2 to 3 times a week. Like nobody knew him. I don't think that would be the case. So anyway, they talked very closely, and then that security guard noticed something clear in his waist. And he had a good solid minute to observe it. And just so everybody knows, it was a clear 12-inch plastic paintball gun with a 1-inch chimney that would have rested on the outside of his pants, because you can't get it in your pants any further because it's a chimney. So it was clear and huge. I don't know, like my brother, they ended up, my brother was like, you want to go back to work? And he was like, yeah. And my brother put out his hand and they shook hands and he walked away. So my brother never threatened that officer. He never took out this clear plastic paintball gun. So that particular officer, made a call to his command center, and what he reported, will all kind of come out in the wash eventually. But the Boston police were called, and so they showed up. And there's some stuff I won't get into about how the situation was even more escalated by, people surveillancing and following who they thought was a dangerous gunman, who were unarmed. A lot of things don't make sense to me, but the Boston police officer arrived, and my brother actually was at the window, the driver's side of the cruiser, which a lot of people didn't know that, because when I first actually saw that video, I was like, but I need to see like before. I want to know what's going on beforehand. Like, you can't just like show me this video. Like, really? And by the way, like several cameras up above directly from this place are, either inoperable or just not working, which has always been kind of puzzling to me too. So that same officer that he was at the window, it appears to me that Juston had his clear plastic paintball gun in his hand at that time. That officer
sorry to interrupt you, but very clearly not an actual weapon, right? Not an actual firearm. Very clearly, obviously.
You have a security guard from 60 feet away who described it as he knew it was a toy.
Okay, continue. Sorry to interrupt.
So, I mean, I would hope that anyone, listen, I know that things can happen fast, okay? But, I also know that particular officer had come to that exact same area for an actual BB gun. So, and they recovered a BB gun. So I know a lot about who these players are and their backgrounds now. So I kind of know what's been fed and what's not real, what's not true. So that officer went back around because some of the Brigham security people were kept coming down and doing, I don't know, whatever they were doing. My brother happened to be out and going up the sidewalk, and he ran after him with this paintball gun. But when he turned around, he walked back down the sidewalk, and that Boston police officer was right there. And while my brother's turning and being like, I'm with law enforcement, and he's pointing up towards the main hospital, and he took out his gun, and then he closed the space with Juston, got closer to him, and within, I don't know why you would do that. You really are a dangerous gunman, but they were 36 inches from each other. Okay, even the officer says it in his statement, 3 feet. So my brother turned around, saw the gun, took out the paintball gun, because he was like, whoa. And, he's in a delusion. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, gosh, this same officer is literally doing details there all the time. The prior day, I have body-worn camera footage of him with a mentally ill woman right up at the main entrance at the emergency room. So this is, there needs to be utmost of care, especially at a hospital. Like, that's what really bothers me. He was at a hospital. Like, this all didn't need to happen at all. And the way that people reported things and didn't report things and didn't report that my brother seemed nonsensical and delusional and paranoid. I mean, those things all matter. They all matter. So anyway, they shot 15 bullets there. And one officer fell backwards. Juston limped to his car while he was massively bleeding. And then he got in his car, drove away slowly. And he was still going slow on Huntington Ave. There was 5 cars behind him. They couldn't run a license plate. And if they had, they all know him. He's known to Boston police. He also was bioed. So he's someone they're watching. So you can run a license plate. You would want to identify your subject. That would be one of the first things you would do. So 5 cars behind him, really slowly. They couldn't get that information.
Can I have that footage? Would you like me to play that footage now?
Yeah, you can play that.
Where is it? There we go. Oh, is it? Okay, yes, it is this one.
All right, so slowly you'll see from the top right, there's his gray car. And there are the Boston police.
Very slow.
Yeah.
5 units.
There's 5. I don't know where the other one, we'll probably see that. So this is his car in the top, and they're just behind him, kind of like a motorcade. Actually, this one's 4, but they were, listen, a lot of them were coming behind. These particular videos, they all skip over the pit maneuver. So we'll never see that. There's his 2 lights coming through the trees. And all the police behind him.
Wow.
And so one officer goes up and over the other side and decides that he's going to do a pit maneuver. And so that's like a violent way that you just stop a car. So you smash into it. I can only assume that he knew they were going to kill him. And I honestly don't know what happened there. I also know that somebody reported a shot right in that direct kind of area. There's a lot of stuff that I have questions about still to this day. Anyway, Juston took off, and then that's when the high-speed chase happened. And so he crashed at a high speed in Brookline, and multiple wheels came off his car. One of which we've never been able to get the tie. I don't know where this one tire went. So I'm thinking, I don't know what happened to it in Boston. I know that his rim looks pretty messed up. So I'm thinking maybe he was driving on a rim. Because I've done that sort of looking into research for that sort of stuff. So he fell out of his car. Meanwhile, he had bled at least 2,000 cc's of blood into his car, which is pretty much half your body of blood. He was in bad shape. He fell onto the sidewalk. A woman who was trained, certified EMT, was in her car waiting for an appointment. She saw him. He was clutching his chest. and he was staggering over to this very small mulch area, and he dropped. And as he dropped, she had got right to his side. And, you know, obviously for her, she's thinking, whoa, like, she thought it was a car accident. She's seeing all this blood. She's thinking he's having a heart attack. I mean, it was like very, you know, I'm sure she was like, what's going on? But she knew like that he was basically lights on, no one home, eyes. His eyes were rolling around like ping pong balls. He was gurgling, so much blood that it was saturated his jacket to him that she was looking for a stick to open it. While this was happening, all the police were running with their guns out and yelling, and they told her to run. She ran. And then one of those officers, the one who did the pit maneuver in Boston, kicked him. And then they backed up, or he backed up, obviously. And then they all shot 31 bullets. So, yeah, it's just, it's shocking. It's shocking, the aftermath. And for people who, you know, are following anything with the Norfolk District Attorney's Office, because this shooting occurred in Brookline, that's Norfolk County. So that means that that's the same district attorney and many of the same investigators that were in the Officer John O'Keefe death investigation and Sandra Birchmore's investigation. So there's a lot, you know, with like body worn cameras, there's all sorts of funnels. So
yes. So just to, we'll continue on with the what happened after that, not necessarily the directly, whatever you're comfortable with. But Jason, what about Juston's story makes this so dear to your heart, or so important to you?
Well, kind of part of my platform is the stigma that's out there. We talked about it in our live, you know, last week when we talked about ADHD and neurodivergence and things along those lines, and really the relation to kind of all of these things that are spectrum-based disorders, like a psychoaffective disorder, where we're talking about things where, you know, is it schizophrenia or is it bipolar or a combination of the two? The mental health stigma out there is really weird. And how I first came into this case was like a lot of people who are viewing right now, where we were paying attention to the Karen Reed trial, and Jen, through her amazing advocacy, was out here and starting to talk about it. And we've had a few DMs kind of along the way, but I have a lot of people that I've been interacting with on the law enforcement side that right away, when I started making like just a couple of posts saying, hey, this case looks interesting, like I'd like to learn more about this, people connected to the Boston Police Department who I consider great friends, their initial reaction was, oh, no, this was a good shoot. And it was a good shoot because everyone right off the bat assumes when they hear the story that he had this clear paintball marker gun that was there, that there was a reason. But the truth of the matter is even if you could take the first officer at the hospital, who clearly needed better training to be dealing with people with mental health issues and everything else, if you could take that spur of the moment situation and say that officer's first shot was justified because for whatever reason he didn't recognize this clear paintball marker, you could never justify the second scene to me ever, that you have this person who's mortally wounded, who's laying on the ground, who's lost more than half of their blood, is clearly not a threat to anyone at that moment. And why were 31 shots fired there? And when Jen brings up the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, when I first started hearing about this case, I didn't correlate them. I just said, here's this case that's interesting to me. And as the facts come out, beyond the initial reaction of people telling me, oh, no, don't worry, this was a good shoot. I always worry. But beyond that, I really started to look at who the investigators were. And at the time, I was already into learning about Sandra Birchmore and starting some advocacy in that direction. And when you put it all together, you really see this big overall thing with the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, in where in any cases, this is almost like a separate issue, because we have the issue that Jen's fighting for eloquently and amazingly every single day about they shouldn't be able to investigate themselves, right? You can see it behind her. And We have the actual circumstances of Justin's death, which bear much further investigation from what we can see. But we have this whole other side where you have this district attorney's office and their Mass State Police Detective Unit detachment that's there. They used to call them the CPAC units. I think you'll hear that referred to a lot, crime prevention and control. And you have these investigators where it seems like every time they're investigating a case where it involves a police officer facing potential liability, a legal liability, they do a completely different investigation than they do. We suddenly start seeing things like, I'm sure Jem will tell us that we have body-worn camera footage that's missing. And we know from bystander video that the police officer had his body-worn camera on, right? So you look at this and you say, well, where is that video? And if it's missing, why haven't we seen it? Today, in the Karen Reed case, we see a motion for them to get the private emails of the sitting district attorney because he was using his iCloud account in order to communicate with judges in the Aiden Carney case. So we know this because Mark Betterow, an amazing attorney, wrote a letter as a discovery request to say, we want to find these things because here's this email. They produced one because the district attorney's office used it in a personnel matter, even though they said that they hadn't yet searched Turtle Boy's phone and they agreed to a taint team. They made representations in court over and over again. But now we find out, so how many other cases, in Justin's case, how many communications were made? Or was it just that the district attorney, once he figured out he was being investigated by the FBI, started to use his private email account? There's so many questions that we need to learn about here, because what's happening is we have these investigations that are off the rails and they don't look like any of the other investigations out of those offices. And it seems more and more that it's intentional, that there is an intentional cover up that goes on where it's almost as if they don't even ask the question. They're not interested in knowing what actually happened to Juston Root. They're not interested in knowing whether it was a good shooter or not. What they're interested in doing is making sure that there's no evidence that can make a police officer look bad. And it's pervasive. And when we hear stories about the Norfolk County District Attorney potentially being the target of a federal investigation, I pray every single day that they're looking at every one of these things. And I try to talk about it every single day, because if they aren't, I want them to know. I want Josh Levy's office to look at this and say, oh, something is wrong here and something's bigger. I think they know. And I think that's what's happening on a larger scale. But I think it's important for us to keep talking about it. So when you combine my advocacy in removing the stigma from these issues of mental illness or neurodivergency or all of these things, and better training for police and police departments, I have an autistic daughter. I will relate an experience later about when she got lost and kind of the community came together and helped us. But you really want, it's a problem that police officers, it's getting better, but it's a problem that police officers aren't trained to deal with these mental health issues. When you have all of these things combined, this case is just right in my wheelhouse. And that's why it's fascinated me from the beginning. From the first day that I heard about it, I've wanted to learn more.
Amazing. Beatriz, I'll get to you in just a moment, but Jen, can I ask, obviously you'll do anything for your brother and you've, tirelessly advocated for him. Do you have a history of advocacy in your past, or was this totally out of your wheelhouse?
This was just dropped on me like a bomb. I mean, I have two young boys. At that time, my kids were, 6 and 9 years old. So I was just in the throes of lots of, taking care of them and stuff. So yeah, it was a bomb, just got dropped on me. And, but in some ways, I think that that's what was moving towards. I don't know why. Because I feel my brother with me. I feel him with me. Even though he's not with me, but I feel that this is a journey for something bigger. I'm not gonna be able to bring back my brother, but I'm certainly gonna help use his story to, one, bring awareness to the mental illness component, but also the component of, we can train all of our police officers and keep training them and training them, but if we're not having accountability in there, we got nothing. And getting a day off or some days of unpaid or whatever vacation taken away from you, that's nothing. That's a little tap on the wrist. We're talking about real consequences that, for those people who want to, dabble on that line, so.
And BEATRIZ, tell all of us a little bit about your link into Juston's story.
All right. So I met Jen. I went to a Karen Reed standout. And, I went there with my little homemade sign and, I didn't know anybody there. And I just showed up and I said, you know what? I know I have one thing in common with everybody here. We all believe in, Karen Reed's innocence. And I immediately ran into Jen. And we started chit-chatting, and then she says, have you heard about Juston Root? And told me her story. And of course, having lost a brother myself of natural causes, I obviously sympathized with her story because, again, when you lose somebody for natural causes is one thing, but when you feel that somebody's brother, that could have been avoided if things would have been done differently. It just spoke to me. So she gave me this little flyer with one of your little cards, and I just held on to it with his picture. And I'm holding my Karen Reed sign and holding Justin's sign. And so again, it just, her story was, is obviously heartbreaking, and it just makes you feel like this could have been avoided, and if there was different steps taken, this should not have happened. This should have had a different outcome.
Absolutely.
And you know what? I actually got back to a thought that I was thinking of. I'm not sure if people fully understand that one officer that Juston was with in Boston on the sidewalk, they also were on the ground together. So I don't know how much contact they had. But it looks significant enough to me. So that person was actually the closest to Juston in Brookline. So it's concerning for anybody discharging their firearm in one scene and then getting behind the wheel of a car with that adrenaline going and that I'm going to go get him, which I think is kind of a lot of what happened. It was, we're going to get him. And put aside that that's my brother, that's an extremely dangerous scenario and situation for all of us. We can't have people engaging in high-speed chases and doing things that escalate like a pit maneuver. I found out recently that they now have things where you can shoot a dart to the car and you can then GPS track it. You can, there's drones. There's also, running a license plate. I mean, it just, a lot of things didn't need to happen. And that same very officer is the one who said that his body-worn camera was in his duty bag. And we come to find out and see him on camera with it on. And he clearly takes it off and throws it into his cruiser and then proceeds to say to someone that I killed the mother F. And I emptied my magazine on him. So
there's something really interesting about that too, because obviously not everyone's heard that, by the way. So I'm glad you brought that out here, because that's a fact that a lot of people who even are tangentially interested in your case haven't quite come up with yet.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that out, like the aftermath. But we have all of these things, right? So he was able to get up, he was able to get in his car, he was able to be out there, the first of the scene and closest. There's all of these things that he had time to do. Right. He had time to do all of these things. And what they chose to do when they got there was to tell the person who was closest to him on the ground, the former EMT who was there, who obviously didn't perceive Juston as a threat. She perceived him as someone who needed help. They had the time to take a moment and order her to get up and move away from the scene. Their intention at that point is clear. Their intention was to shoot him there.
Absolutely.
But if they had the time to do that, they had the time to assess once again whether he was a threat or not.
Right.
And that was never done. And it's indicative of the fact that it was because they had already made up their mind of what they were going to do. If we go back to policing in America has changed a lot because of the evolution of video cameras and cell phone cameras and things, body worn cameras. Although in this case, it doesn't seem to help us when they can just chuck it away and pretend that they didn't have it. But because policing has changed, we kind of forget in the past, because what used to happen and what would happen in the 80s, in the early 90s, and prior to that, is it was almost universally known that if you ran from the police, regardless of whether you were guilty of any crime, regardless of whether, if you were, maybe you were just scared, maybe you were a black person who was being stopped for driving while black and were afraid of the police officer and you took off, you were guaranteed to get a beating. Like, it was just a known thing that if you ran from the police at some point, and it usually would happen somewhere in between while they were transporting you and you arrived at the station. I know some police stations actually had, there was no camera in the elevator. So maybe you would come into the Sally Port and in custody, and you would look a little bit different when you got off the elevator than you did when you went in. But there was this concept that you were going to be punished for making them run, or punished for making them chase you. There was just this, it was just kind of ingrained into policing, and nobody really even talked about it. Like, it wasn't widely known unless you were somebody maybe who knew somebody who ran from the police. So we've kind of gotten past that, right? Because we have, for the most part, because we have cameras everywhere, we have all of these things. But this just reminds me so much of that by the time they got there and they got out of the car, nothing that already occurred mattered. Like, nothing, that there was no assessment of whether he was a threat. This was, you ran from us and now you're going to pay. And I'm going to say, I killed the mother effer at the end of that, because almost as if in the officer's head, he was already justified without ever having been investigated. And that's, so if you can even get into his mindset and say that, that's great. But for everyone else to adopt the same attitude in theory, that he doesn't need to be investigated because he was, in his head, he was justified, it's horrific.
It is. And to speak to the Norfolk District Attorney's Office and the level of investigating that they do, I wouldn't even call it investigating. I'm always putting quotes around it because it's like legit. I mean, they exonerated the officers 30 days after this. Their whole intention was to get the officers off, not go after the truth. And how is it that almost a year and a half later, it's us who has to bring forth that this particular officer from Boston, who's closest to him in Brookline, so he shot 5 bullets in Boston and he shot 8 in Brookline. And his bullets were all found the next day in the shallow bush by Buchanan. But okay, I just have to throw that in. But like, how is it that we bring that to their attention? I mean, didn't all of those investigators at the Norfolk District Attorney's Office, didn't they look at the videos? Did they not find it horrifying that you have the trooper coming out like, suicide by a cop, and, don't say nothing to nobody, you got a rep coming? I mean, it is absolutely bananas to watch this stuff. I mean, I actually was like, is this this? And then they're walking all over the crime scene. I'm like, okay. Everything that I might have ever thought that things, how it goes down, went way out the window, because I was like, oh, okay. But, I'm just thinking, you didn't even watch the body-worn camera videos, because you would have known that officer took his camera off and threw it in. And you can see it on 2 different body-worn cameras. So I'm like, you clearly were not interested in any type of collection or asking those officers how Juston was, what his condition was. Hi, you know that he was in a major accident. And that same officer was also an EMT before he was a police officer. There's so much that when you start to look at it, you have to say to yourself, it's not reasonable for what they did there. And they'll say it's, well, there were 6 of them, so it must have been, they all did the same thing. No, actually, some of them shot because they heard bullets. 3 of them are rookies. They've only been an officer for a year or 2. They were just already holding a gun, hearing shots, and just shooting, which is also another scary thing for people who live in Brookline. Anybody care that all these bullets were shot right there and a bullet went across the parking lot? Just never mind everything that happened. Are we okay with that level of excessive force in our community? Because it puts us all in danger. when you go to a threat, you are supposed to come to the situation, one, to try to de-escalate, but two, you meet with the level of force. That did not happen here because he was clearly 1000% zero threat.
Right. And I think I'm sorry, I hate this. I'm sorry. Let me jump in 1 second. I do think he no longer had the clear paintball marker on his person when he got out of the car. Is that correct?
Correct. So Juston, there's a picture of one in his car because he had two. That was at the foot where his foot was. The paintball gun was severely damaged in Boston, and he only had a clear handle in his hand when he left. I mean, that's probably why they weren't shooting anymore, because they probably like, oh, that's not a gun in his hand. What they did recover on scene was a BB gun with a 6-inch metal rod out of it. Now, the state trooper says it was in his right hand. And we know that's not true because Juston's right hand was shot 4 times and one was through and through in the inside of his hand. So that was an entry point. So he had nothing in his hands and there was no blood on this BB gun and there was no damage. So their stories just don't really add up. That was recovered at the scene. The state trooper just threw it at random into the mulch, which that was another thing where I was like, wow, that's what you do with evidence. Okay. And you also move dead bodies at a crime scene. You're not supposed to do that. The state trooper also had a taser. He had a taser. You know, there were plenty of other things that they could have done besides, just killing him. And it's like comply and die. Comply or die.
That was going to be another question of mine. But why didn't they consider any of the less lethal options that they carry? That goes back to the training on how to deal with people in mental health crisis as well, because the goal should never be from the police officer on the street. The goal should never be that I'm going to punish you or that I'm going to be the judge, jury, and in this case, executioner. Like that just shouldn't happen. I loved seeing in the comments, by the way, that Anne is here, and Anne is making some great points. You know, she said, we talked about them taking 30 days to clear the officers. They took 30 seconds to clear the officers. There was never an investigation into the officers. There was how can we frame the story in a way that allows us to get to our preconceived notion that the officers should all be exonerated in this case. And that's emblematic of what's happening in these other cases. And, when we look at Sandra Birchmore, it was, how can we make it, now that the evidence has started to come out in that case and we've heard the nature of what's occurred, they literally did every single thing in their power to make sure that Farwell wasn't going to be held responsible. And it took the feds stepping in to do that. And I really hope that the feds take a look at this case as well, because among their mandates and what they should be doing is they should be protecting the most vulnerable people in our society. And I submit that includes both Juston and Sandra Birchmore, that they were the most, I'm not saying John O'Keefe deserved it because he could take care of himself. Of course not. But I'm saying there has to be a special focus on people who really can't do as good a job of taking care of themselves. It can't be that we're going to eliminate them. I mean, it's horrific.
Well, it's very scary because I feel like I've always felt like there's a tsunami coming of mental health struggles, and especially with, COVID, and there's a lot of things that happened, and it's like coming down the pike. I mean, 2 other people have been killed by police here. You have Michael Conlon, who was in a mental health crisis. They knew he was mentally ill. They stopped the crisis intervention person or someone who could talk with him. They killed him in Newton. And then, then you have Brendan Riley, who was in Lexington at a group home for mentally ill people. Those officers knew him, killed. And I'm thinking, what? This should not be happening. People shouldn't reach out to me who have children who are mentally ill and saying they're so afraid that what happened to Juston will happen to their child. And it was always my biggest fear, by the way. I always feared that I would get the knock at the door. And when it happened, it was a news camera and a news person at my door. And I kept opening and closing because I thought, if I close the door, this is not happening. And then I was just screaming, spinning. I didn't know what was going on. I was thinking, thank God my kids were not home. Because that's not, I mean, I'm just saying, like, it's the worst nightmare of someone coming to your door with that type of news, you know? And I wanted to also just say, the 15 bullets in Boston, one of those hit a valet in the head. He lived, but he has, you know, injuries that will last him the rest of his life. And that very day, they already put out the spin that my brother shot the valet. He was in Brookline. He took out and produced the gun again, and he wouldn't put it down, so they had to shoot him. So they were very methodical and very calculated with what they did from the first minute after this happened. It was cleanup time. And boy,
Absolutely.
I'm not letting them get away with not having the truth out there. Because, you know, that's just, it's evil. It's evil and it's wrong. And I won't stand for it. I just won't.
Could I just go back to Jason, your point about, I think it's a really important point in terms of intentionality. The act of ordering the EMT, I believe Shelley is her name, away from Juston shows that they had a clear course of action that they planned to take. And so if this was not police officers, if this was civilians, that would be straight up guilty. Not even no point going to trial. This is just a plea deal. You're going to jail for murder, prison for murder. So I think that's outrageous that that's just been glossed over and swept under the rug.
And hearing I didn't know until right now, actually, and I need to do a better job of paying attention, but I didn't know till right now that the officer was a former EMT. So I actually have a question, which is, what aid did the officer render following the shooting? That's what I'd like to know.
No. The officers that shot Juston didn't render him any aid. Someone maybe about 3 minutes later did, but I think they all knew that he was pretty much dead. And then the next question is why did they move a dead body? And if my memory serves me correctly, because there's a lot of numbers in my head, they didn't leave Chestnut Hill they didn't leave for almost 25 minutes after the shooting with Juston's body.
Right. So there was no need to move it. They certainly could have
They
investigated.
should not have moved it. And then also the ballistics team was alone with his body at Beth Israel, because I have the notes that the ballistics team was coming. So they were with him before he got to the medical examiner's office. So it's a lot of shady stuff that you would think that, oh, why would that happen? You know, or, you know, also another thing that people get perplexed by, and I actually now know that, you know, they were handcuffing a dead body. Like essentially you're handcuffing a dead person, but they do handcuff dead people. I know that was very shocking to me in the beginning. Cause I'm like, you clearly know, like, the person's dead. Like they're not going anywhere.
Do you think, is that something to do with trying to cover their asses again with saying handcuff now, so that it looks like there was a need for a handcuffs before death?
It could be a process of which, you know, we have now taken him into custody. But I don't know why can you take someone who's dead into custody? I don't know. It's like, just leaves me with more questions.
Yes.
And one thing I want to add too is, you know, one of the body worn camera footages that we've watched in the past shows the officer after he walks away. Another officer is like, oh, let me check you out. Are you okay? Like almost like that, like the theatrics of it. Like they were checking each other out to see if they were shot and asked them to turn around. Can you speak to that? Like what was that all about?
I mean, this is the thing. In the beginning, people said, well, they knew that he shot someone in Boston, that, you know, they had this in their head. And I'm like, actually, no, they didn't. Because if you listen to each, and by the way, I listened to probably and watched each body worn camera. Some I watched for 8 hours. Okay. Slowly doing the hues, everything. I listened to all the audio. So I started marking down when things were said. Nobody knew that someone was shot at Brigham until 9:32 a.m. And right when that officer was checking, the officer from Boston, the one who threw the body-worn camera in, he then said to him, did anybody get shot up at Brigham? Because right now he's thinking, oh shit, you know what I'm saying? We know that this, you know, well, he already knew, by the way, he already knew. That officer needs to be in jail.
Absolutely.
He should definitely be in jail. If there's anybody who I want it to be, it's him.
Well, it definitely sounds like he should be in jail because from everything that I can see, and you know, it looks to me like he murdered your brother. There doesn't even seem to be much doubt based on as the story rolls out. There's a duty, you know, backing up when you talked about the police officers at the scene that shot when they heard gunshots. That's not an uncommon phenomenon. It happens in the military, it happens in law enforcement. There is you know, the bottom line is for some police officers, we see this heightened adrenaline answer, I killed the mother effer, and these things. But by and large, I have a lot of friends who are police officers. They don't want to draw their guns. And they are in a situation where there are a lot of police officers that are scared to be in the situation that they're in. And when gunshots start going off, they start firing because they're trained to protect each other at all costs and see everyone else as a target. And in this case, that's what happened, right? So you had these officers, especially the rookie officers, are here, and suddenly everyone's shooting. And in the fog of war that happens there is they may not know who's shooting, and are they being shot at, and are their partners being shot at, or this. So that's a very common phenomenon that happens. The only one that can't use that phenomenon is the same police officer that fired those first shots in Boston that threw his body-worn camera in the car, because he's the one where we see an intentionality. So even if you could get, and I'm not, by no means am I exonerating the other officers of anything. There needs to be much more investigation. But if you can get past, if you could even say, well, those officers, they were in this situation, it was confusing, there was gunshots. I actually know someone who trains police officers, was a former officer himself, and now he trains officers in self-defense tactics and different things, because there are a lot of departments that are trying to find ways to not immediately resort to lethal force, right? But when this person trains police officers, he does it with strobe lights and fog machines and all kinds of things to create the chaos, because it's not the same when you go into a gym somewhere and you're in this well-lit gym and here's your instructor and here's and you're in this demonstration scenario. Not enough police get this real world training where they're in a situation that is confusing and chaotic while training, because and it needs to happen, because what's happening on the street is they get into a situation that is confusing and chaotic. And maybe that's because their officer next to them has malintent and they don't know, but it gives them kind of an excuse. And that's something that we need to focus on for officers, to be able to keep their heads in these stressful situations, not just take someone who's been out there for a year and a half and throw them in a gunfight, because they have never experienced something like that.
Can I ask a question? I mean, I presume that Massachusetts has tasers. Why did it escalate to lethal force from the get-go? Obviously, this is the question you have.
Well, Boston police did not have any tasers. They had pepper spray and a baton. The state police, there was 5 Boston police officers and 1 state trooper. That state trooper did have a taser. He also had a very violent incident that happened a year before, and he was under investigation, and they still had him working. So it's just a mess. When you start to really look into each avenue, it's a mess.
And also, just to bring up too, where this happened, it was obviously during the day, because you said it started in Boston at 9:30 approximately. Where this happened was also a shopping plaza right next to it, where you could have had, people. I mean, it's right there in the same parking lot. So I just wanted, to bring that up too. It happened during the daytime in a parking lot where people do their food shopping. I mean, that's crazy.
And you were there in the mulch
Mhm.
area, and you know how small that area is. You know, the reason why they were comfortable shooting all those bullets is they were actually pounding them into them in point blank range, because otherwise there would be a lot of crossfire happening. So they were very close. Too close to say that you would be afraid, because they actually ignored all training. Training would be, you know, first of all, they had time. Okay, so time is on their side. They also had multiple officers. And by the way, they probably had 30 to 40 other officers coming behind them 1 minute later. I mean, the amount of police that were there and the stuff, I was like, did they think he was the marathon bomber? Like, what? How could a mentally ill person down at a hospital with 4 mental health facilities, like, how could that end up in Brookline with 31 bullets? They shot 46 bullets that day. I mean, what the heck? That, when does that happen here? When does that happen in Massachusetts? Because that's like not normal at all.
No, it's outrageous.
It's outrageous. It's egregious. It's like mind blowing. It's, you know. So.
You know, when we talk about the training too, you have that clearly, like the first thing that anyone who carries a firearm for any kind of duty is taught is that if you're gonna point your firearm and pull the trigger, you clear your backstop. Like, it is literally the number one thing in training someone how to operate with a firearm. You clear your backstop, and they obviously didn't do that, given that we have a civilian that was getting shot by a ricochet. We have all of these things that happen, and I don't understand. And it's the same thing in all of these other cases. I don't understand how they're just, in only these cases, they throw everything out the window. I'm not saying they're perfect in every other case. There's mistakes that are made. There's things that happen, but the level of these cases, it is every one of them. It appears that when they go into for the investigation, that it's not an investigation, it's an exoneration. How do we do this in such a way that we can make sure that no law enforcement officer is going to accept? I would like to liken Detective Tully in that unit. I liken him to Hank from Chicago PD. And one of my friends the other day, DJ from Calling All Beings, messaged me, and he said, "You're getting it wrong. You know, it's I'm going to screw this up because I'm going to forget the police officer that he said, but Michael Chiklis's character in I don't remember the name of the show, but it was another police officer and actually looks like Brian Albert. You have this idea where these police, I'm sure someone's going to save me in the comments, hopefully, but you have this idea where it's almost as if they only exist to exonerate other police officers. It's like a rogue unit of the Mass State Police that's just out there to see how they can get involved and make sure that no police officers face consequences. It's horrific.
And can I ask a question?
That's why there's this.
Can I, on that note, can I who are the, I mean, I know Tim is throwing out some names, not now necessarily, but previously, some of the, and you said Buchanan before, Jen. Who are some of the bad actors, the names we've come to know and despise and be concerned about in that Boston PD or the Mass State Police or the investigating bodies?
So I'm at this stage of the case, maybe. I mean, it's taking a look at how it was investigated or not investigated, because we can't actually do anything unless we have a real investigation with people who really want to find out what's going on. But the lead investigator for Juston's death investigation was Fanning. We had Proctor. Proctor is the one who told my stepmother that my brother had shot someone at the hospital and that he produced the gun again in Brookline and they had to shoot him, when he clearly knew Juston did not have a firearm. Then we have Garino, who actually I didn't really gather that he was the one that collected all the digital evidence in Brookline. And there's some cameras there that are missing or they didn't get, which are kind of like basic 101. You would get it. So I thought that was interesting that Garino's in there. We have Buchanan because he was there the following day collecting the 8 bullets from that one officer, who, by the way, I didn't get to say, but he actually had someone else's department issued firearm. That same officer. So I don't know how.
How does that even happen? How does that even happen? Wow, it just says a lot for the systems in place, the training.
It's literally outrageous. I mean, every part is just mind-blowing to me, because I'm like, what? It's the more you look, the more you're like, what? How could this happen? So we have Buchanan done. I mean, I've seen Tully on some of the emails, stuff that was internal. So yeah, it's the same, same group, the same crew, and I think
so. This is outrageous. This is outrageous.
It is, and this happened in a span of 24 months, right? So Juston was February 7th, 2020. Then you had Sandra Birchmore 1 year later, I believe it was February 4th, 2021, and then you had Officer John O'Keefe the following year, January 29th, 2022. That's a span of 24 months. And the thing that's concerning is that anytime an officer is involved with a death, it is extremely important that this is investigated by an outside body with no Massachusetts law enforcement ties, because they all work with each other. They work with each other, and they cannot be impartial. And so you're never going to get that transparent investigation that each person whose life was taken away violently, that they deserve to have their death investigated for people who really want to know what happened.
How do you see that working functionally? Like, should there be a unit that's under the Attorney General's office, let's say, who is not affiliated with the state police beyond the fact that they both work for the state of Massachusetts, but it's an independent unit that works for the Attorney General, that goes out and investigates these, investigates the investigators, investigates the cops, investigates the investigation, is able to look at that. I'm trying to think of the mechanics of how we could make it work,
So there's a lot. I mean, obviously there's a lot in play, and there's some things that you could think about, but then when you get further into it, you're like, oh, well, I don't know about that. The one thing that another impacted family member who's done a lot, and actually they're doing a Netflix now thing, he said that there's the Betsy Lehman Center, that's where you kind of look at like medical mishaps and things that happen, and that we need to have something like that for law enforcement. And the way that when plane crashes happen, there is an agency and a group that comes out and they do that. And then you also have that data collection, because the data collection is another issue. And especially too with mentally ill. So if you were to do a public records request to Boston Police and ask them how many interactions they had with someone who might have been suspected to have mental illness or a mental something, there's no data. That they're not going to be able to tell you how many people that they encountered that they either knew that they had mental illness or were suffering from mental illness, or let's just say they were having a medical crisis. I mean, those are all very important data points. So I think that having an agency that can come in that's separate from all of them, because I'm not too happy with the AG's office and their response. They think that what Norfolk did, I actually have an email from them stating that they didn't think that it would be, nothing would really come of if they had another investigation, since there were 2. And I'm like, well, first of all, there was not 2 of a death investigation. There was an investigation in Boston that took 3 years where they were just being investigated for the deadly force. And then you have the where they actually execute Juston and shoot all these bullets, and that takes 30 days. So I don't know. I'm not happy. I wouldn't be happy with the Attorney General's office. I would want it to be a total separate entity that, yes, someone will probably have to be in charge, because it'd have to be probably an arm of the government, or, the public. Right?
I know here in Connecticut, just south of you guys, we have any officer involved death is investigated by the Chief State's Attorney's Office, which is similar, although for us. So, it's the top prosecutor in the state, and they actually do a very comprehensive job of going out and investigating. I often question, that's why I asked the question to begin with, is I often question, what arm of government could we get to do this? Because what's the mechanism for bringing in an outside agency or an outside nonprofit or whatever else? It's probably not going to fly. It's going to have to be under some form of government structure. So I'm just trying to find what would work, looking forward as how do we solve these problems. And when I brought up the AG's office, in no means was I saying that it should be under the purview of the current attorney general, because the current attorney general in the state of Massachusetts does not care. Like they would be involved in this. They didn't do a good job in Sandra Birchmore. They did no job in the Officer John O'Keefe murder at all. And talk about an obvious case where they should have stepped in, because we actually learn more every single day about the actual corruption of a sitting district attorney. So we have all of these things that are happening, and they've basically been completely silent. And I probably once a week I'm on Twitter and I tag the attorney general and the governor in the state of Massachusetts, as she came out today, the governor, and Maura Healey came out today and made a statement about how the Massachusetts State Police are not going to cooperate with Trump's mass deportation plan, right? And I read that and I say, first of all, like, I don't think any of us really think that's going to happen anyway. But even if it were going to, that's her most important thing to talk about today. She's not talking about Enrique. She's not talking about Sandra Birchmore. She's not talking about John O'Keefe. She's not talking about Juston Root. She's not talking about what's actively happening in these. And thanks to Karen Reed, a lot of these stories, including Justin's story, are starting to become national news stories. So you have a sitting governor and a sitting attorney general who literally don't care about any political repercussions or any embarrassment that they are going to face every single day from people looking at them saying, why aren't you doing anything about this? Hello, Colonel of the State Police. Now we have a brand new one. Why aren't you? I mean, and maybe I'll give him some time, right? He gets the benefit of the doubt for me because he did, we all of a sudden see Tully's been reassigned, but why aren't these people doing anything? They're doing nothing. And it's heartbreaking.
It's and Andrea Campbell was Justin's city councilor for Matt, because he lived in Mattapan. And I had a couple conversations with her when she was a city councilor. And then we even had a joke where I was like, well, it looks like Rachel Rollins is going to be U.S. attorney. I was like, oh, I'm going to get to her, because I had already had a meeting with her one time for I met her 2 times, but one I had a 45-minute, a Zoom call with her. And I was telling Andrea, I'm going to go talk to her when she gets into office. And she was like, oh, I have some cases for her to look at too. And then it's just and now here you are. And I'm like, I just call, it's like, okay, you're on the Moore machine. This is full steam ahead. We're not going to do that. We're not doing that. It's this is the thing for them. They're thinking there's no benefit, right? You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But the thing is, in the end, we're going to make sure that it's bad that you did it, because that's actually about humanity. And it's about, making the change that's good for all of us, and not just giving people a free pass just because they're, law enforcement.
It's politically expedient, so you can get the police union behind you, right? But I think that's important, and I think that's probably what I admire about you the most, is that we're just not going to let it happen. So people like us, people like everybody here on this panel, and people like the amazing people in the comments section, and the people that follow us on social media, something has happened. There's this change. We're suddenly energized, where we're having, on the 13th, November 13th, right? There's going to be a standout in the afternoon at the district attorney's office. And I'm super excited because I'm going to attend it.
Yes, we'll meet you in person. We're going to be there too.
So we have these things.
FOMO. Sorry, continue.
We'll call you we'll message with you.
Yes.
Thompson, you will probably be there.
But we have these things now where something is happening. The people have had enough, and it's really exciting to be in a time where we talked about the media earlier, right? So you have the media, and the media, they just read press releases from the police department. And the reason that they do that is there's multiple reasons. One, most of the media, their staffs have been cut down to a shoestring budget. They don't really have the resources to get out here and report on the stories anymore. I mean, newspapers are all but gone. In the TV news business, every day there's more and more cuts, and there's more and more local news that's not happening. I have a friend I'm hearing in Western Mass. There was a news channel the other day that laid off most of their on-air staff and a huge portion of their behind-the-scenes staff. So you have this where they barely exist as it is. So they don't really have the resources. They're somewhat lazy. If someone's going to hand them the news, they're going to take it, right? And they need to maintain their relationships with these police departments so that they continue to get the news handed to them. So they don't want to upset the apple cart. It takes the FBI coming in and arresting a Farwell for them to be like, now we're going to report on this because, we have a law enforcement source on our side. So that the rise of social media and independent journalism is really it's transforming things in an amazing way, because we can have standouts. We can get hundreds of people to stand outside the sitting district attorney's office, and then the media is interested, because now we've got something juicy and scandalous happening here. So now the media wants to know, because there's a sensationalism that still exists. So they're going to come down and now they're going to report on it. So I'm so happy for you that we're in this era where we have the Karen Reed case. She was able to afford these attorneys. They were able to come up with a strategy and get it out there to start getting information to the public. And everyone is united, because the same kind of people who care about that care about this. The same kind of people who care about Sandra Birchmore. And I would venture to say we're reaching more and more people every day who just never would have heard the story. So I love it.
And that's why I really think YouTube is the way of the future, because honestly, ever since YouTube is digging into things and people are making comments. I mean, when we're watching the local media, the mainstream media, it's a 30-second clip, a 1-minute clip. You're not getting all the facts. And I think now we're getting our information on YouTube, that we're able to talk about it, that we're able to, for an hour and a half, digest certain topics. So I really think that this is the way of the future, because look at what happens when there's a snowstorm in Massachusetts. It's snow. So the panic that they set in on the one topic, and then it's done. So like a lot of these topics, it's like, it's very short. And, that's why I really think that I stopped watching regular TV because it's not informative. You're getting a bias, it's just not the way of the future, I think, because it's not informative. You're getting a bias.
Someone has audio. But we do see this, right? So it's all packaged into these little sound bites. I'm actually working on a case. The reason, and I can tell you almost nothing about it. But the reason that I have Hartford, Connecticut in my background today, that I did that at the last minute, was there's a case in Hartford. It's going to be
something's going on with the
something's going on.
I think is somebody not wearing earbuds?
I'm not wearing earbuds. Something's going on with the
something's going on. Hold up, we need Adam.
Is somebody not wearing earbuds?
Jason, it sounds like you. I'm joking. It should be okay though. I usually do my streams when I don't play any video.
Oh, it's me. Hold on, I put mute.
Oh.
Maybe Adam took a break. All right, so
Adam will fix it.
I'm working on this case, right? And it's in Hartford, Connecticut. I can't tell you about it, but when I can tell you about it, everyone is going to be appalled at what's going on in this case. But one thing I'll tell you about it is that there is a victim of a crime, and that victim of a crime was a horrific domestic violence situation, and that victim was injured in a way that they were unconscious for a period of time. They were medically put into a coma. They were able to recover from that, and they're facing kind of this long rehab situation. It happened earlier this year. And while that victim of the crime was experiencing recovery and doing things like that, about 3 days after the crime happened, there was all of a sudden news stories, right? We saw the original news stories, which were very kind of basic. They listed kind of the location of the crime and what happened and what was going on. And then about 3 days later, there was another round of news stories where they're releasing kind of very intimate details from the arrest warrant affidavit for the person that was charged with the crime. The crime itself isn't that controversial. It's actually pretty open and shut. The person was a victim of some horrific domestic violence. But what happened after, we were all of a sudden we're seeing these news stories, and the news stories are releasing very graphic details, which is it's unusual, unusually graphic details and intimate details, some of which I would say put some of the witnesses in danger, frankly. And I couldn't figure it out, but there was a common thread among some of these news stories, is that there was a kind of a pundit that was being brought on and had their own outside interest in the case. That's all I'll say. I really can't identify this case right now. It involves someone who is still determining how they want to tell their story and what they want to do. But there was a pundit that was out there that suddenly was being mentioned in every news story from different sources. And it just didn't make any sense that they were all going to this person. And what it looks to me, and I'm still investigating it, so I'm not saying anything definitively, but it looks to me like there was somebody who is out there who is supposed to be helping victims, who used the story as a way to promote their own organization and what they're doing. And in doing so, they released a whole bunch of details and a push for funding, which was really interesting to me. So I didn't notice anything about the story until I started talking to a friend of the family, and that friend of the family knew what I was doing here and in these cases on Twitter. And when they reached out to me, that was my first question for the family. I said, did you give this advocate per se, did you give them, information on your story, or did you talk to them about what should be happening here? And they said, no, we've never talked to them. So to this day, this advocacy organization that's supposed to be here to advocate for victims in cases like this has never to this day spoken to the family. They spoke to every news station, but they didn't do anything to actually advocate for the victim in this case. So it really is a time where the mainstream media someone brought them the story. They had all these salacious details. They did all of these things, but the person bringing the story had an agenda. It appears to me, to be fair, I'm very early in the investigation of it, but from what I can see, that's what occurred. And so you have these people, no one's talking about it. And you have a victim who's reached out and said, actually, the conclusions that they came to when they described what happened in my incident are wrong. And I want to help other people that might be in the situation I was in, but they're telling my story, but they're not telling it correctly. And they're telling it in a way that benefits them. But I actually want to help people by telling this. When I tell you this story, I hope I'm going to tell the story, but if I can tell the story, when I do, your hearts are going to break when you hear this story. It's really compelling. And it really is a case of someone who, thank God she's alive. It was a case of somebody who was victimized twice. She was victimized as a victim of a horrific domestic violence incident, and then she was victimized again by the media using her story in conjunction with a victim's advocate who should have been helping her in order to drive the news cycle and raise money. So I hope that at some point we'll be out here telling her actual story, because the victim is inspiring. It's someone that's here that will be able to kind of go forward in a way that I think is going to benefit everybody. And that's important about what we do, because that level of detail you don't get from the mainstream media. You can't get into the investigation like we can. You're not going to have Ted Daniels. Great. I'm actually a fan. I think he does a good job right down the middle, but he's not going to be talking in detail about there was, 6 officers, they fired 37 bullets and this, and then where's the body worn camera footage? They're just not going to get into the level of investigation that the police should have done. They'll hit the sound bites, but people like us, we're really here to dig in and kind of find the truth of these situations that seem so elusive,
Right. When we were out there doing standouts, the mainstream media is out there, recording us for an hour, and then they play a 10-second clip of this is what it was.
Yeah,
So,
that's the news business.
Yeah, and also they have obviously different news outlets have different backers, financial backers. There are political affiliations. it's independent journalism is a tough gig, and I think you're right. The YouTube world, I mean, it's not perfect, and there are plenty of self-interested parties within YouTube as well. But for the most part, we have a lot more freedom to in terms of, there's no time constraints. Like we could be here for 7 hours if we want, and we can so long as you're not being slanderous or defaming anybody, if you're just speaking facts and spreading information that are verifiable, then it's quite a blessing, really.
Yeah, and I have to say, I hope I never have to write a story about Elon Musk or Twitter, because I definitely make enough money to pay for my Twitter premium and get a couple of Kit Kats per month. So if I combine that, I could even get probably 2 king size Kit Kats and the $15 that it costs for Twitter premium. I'm really rolling in the dough on Twitter right now. So I might be biased in that way, but other than that, I'll cover any other topic.
Adam thought you said Ted Danson. Oh no, wait. Ted Daniels. Yeah. I've got a few interesting comments and questions, so I thought maybe we could go through some of those. Darlene, earlier on, we were talking about the response and outcomes of Juston's murder. Police should have a mental health care officer or doctor around for each shift. Is that not something? What's the training or what does that look like in Massachusetts? Jen, do you know?
I just know about the Boston police, and I know that like around 2010, I think around then, they were trying to come up with some policies called EDPs for emotionally disturbed persons. And I only know that through the Terrence Coleman case, who was another mentally ill man who was killed by the Boston police. I believe it was 2016. In his case, because I was following it, I downloaded some of the court documents and I started to read like, oh, they actually had a policy that they were writing, but they never implemented it. There was a lot of pushback. And so you fast forward, 2020, still. And even now, I haven't seen anything for it. As far as their training, they do have some training, not as much as we would probably all like them to have. And by the way, this shouldn't be all just falling on police officers too. I think that, as a society, we have to really start to prioritize, our mental well-being. And, this is not, it's not fair to them. And just so you know, Jason, that's why I got involved with trying to get the Medical Civil Rights Act passed, which actually we got it passed in Connecticut. It's the first state, when we really wanted Massachusetts to be the first state. I didn't put the bill forward, another group did, but I helped them for many years and gave lots of testimony. And, we did something at the State House last December. And that's if, an officer comes into a situation and they see someone where, even if they're wondering something going on, it's not up to them to figure it out. They should just get EMS or an EMT. And it would be a law. We want it to be a law because we want it not to be up to the discretion of an officer. And then once, like in my brother's case, it's very clear that he was incapacitated on the ground, covered in blood. In an instant like that, they should have called EMS. And had that been a law, then they would have broke the law, and then they wouldn't have got qualified immunity, which actually is the free ticket to kill. There actually literally is zero consequences. If you start to look into Massachusetts and see when was the last time an officer was found guilty and actually have a sentence for killing someone on duty, it's a rabbit hole that you keep going down and down into. So anyway, I'm happy that Connecticut passed it, and I hope that Massachusetts will get on board with it because they did it for police service dogs, and I think they can do it for human beings.
I think someone hint Miss Shorty, I think someone should do a whole stream on qualified immunity, because it really is amazing how many crimes that police officers can commit and get away with it. And the premise behind qualified immunity is, unless unless something is clearly established in terms of them violating a civil right or whatever else, if it's not clearly established in case law, then essentially police officers are granted this qualified immunity, which means that even if the court says, yes, what they did was wrong or what they did was illegal, it wasn't clearly established in this law, so we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt just because they're police officers. Now, even though I'm a police accountability activist, I support police. So I'm kind of a natural for people to look at me and say, oh, well, you should be for qualified immunity because you have all these friends that are police officers. And I can tell you that my friends who are police officers will privately tell me that they also don't support qualified immunity because they know that there are bad officers on their staff. And when you start to look at some of the cases across the country where officers have claimed qualified immunity, they've claimed qualified immunity for crimes that are like we're talking about in Juston's case. They murdered somebody. These aren't like, oh, we didn't know that was wrong. But as long as they can point to in every single, and it's circuit by circuit, if it's not nationally established by like the Supreme Court, as long as they can say there's no case law clearly saying this was wrong, 9 times out of 10, they get granted the qualified immunity they're seeking. There's a great organization, the Institute for Justice, IJ.org, that has a project on immunity and accountability that does amazing work. And in a lot of cases, and if you haven't talked to them, Jen, maybe you should, because in a lot of cases, they will take on a case where officers are claiming qualified immunity and they'll go to bat in order to have that qualified immunity revoked. So that, or not granted in an appeal situation, because it's very, very important. I don't want police officers, people say police officers should be held to a higher standard. I think all of us would settle that they just be held to the same standard the rest of us are.
I'd be happy with that.
Yeah. So you shouldn't just get to murder somebody because you're a police officer. If any one of us were in the situation of that police officer who shot Juston Root in Boston and then again led the show in Brookline, we would be arrested for murder. We would be charged. And you know what? That officer should have a chance to exonerate himself on the stand. I believe that everyone is innocent until proven guilty, even if I think they're guilty. So by all means, the problem is that officer, the odds of him, and I know we're still fighting for this, but the odds of him ever facing charges for that incident are so low that it's likely that the people that murdered Juston, and it kills me to say this with you on the stream, Jen, the likelihood that anyone is going to ever be charged with his murder is infinitesimally low, below 1%.
I'm not even putting any eggs in that basket.
Right.
I'm pretty much clear that I'm not going to get the justice that one would have thought that we could have had. I'm not going to get it in the legal system. And part of the beautiful, ironic, also heartbreaking intersection of when our civil case was dismissed by the First Circuit of Appeals, this all happened in April. And so, that sort of send off was very crushing to me. But then Karen Reed's trial started, and then I started hearing, Proctor, Buchanan, Michael Morrissey, and I started to feel like I was so obsessed with like hearing everything. But it was also infuriating. It's just and a whole other level of infuriating because I feel like I know who she's dealing with.
Yeah.
Especially when you read over and you see how they did Juston's investigation. If they say you did it, they're going to make it look like you did it. And they're also the keeper of all the investigative materials and evidence. And, I always said to my lawyers, well, we got what they wanted us to have. There's so much that I want and I have lists of, but, you could spend years literally trying to get these pieces. But I'm going to get justice by being able to do things like this and tell Juston's truth and have the truth be told. That's where I find peace in my heart. And it's a bonus if down the road there is an independent investigation with independent fact finding where people are actually going to really interview these officers and ask the right questions. That will just be a bonus.
I just noticed that Mizzy has joined us. Thank you for being here, Mizzy. A little bit fangirling. Those of you who, I'm sure everybody knows that Mizzy is the loudest, the strongest, and the most perseverant voice in the bringing Sandra Birchmore's case to light. And thank you, Mizzy, for everything you've done. It must be quite inspiring for you, Jen, to see, you know, what Mizzy has been able to achieve along the way and be fortified and rejuvenated in your fight here.
I think we're all, you know, Mizzy and I have been in contact, and we had a Zoom, and, you know, a part of talking with each other is that this is a stronger together. This is about all of us. It's not just about one story, because actually in all these stories, it could be us, and it could be someone that we love, and we should all care. And that's why, you know, we started to talk about, like, okay, let's have a collaborative standout. And that's what's going to happen next Wednesday, November 13th, from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. at the Norfolk DA's office. And that's at 45 Shawmut Road. If anybody wants to, you know, do the replay.
From 2 to 5.
2 to 5. And don't worry if you don't have signs, because you know what? We got lots of extra ones.
Yes.
And we have ones too with all the victims' pictures. And I think that's, you know,
that's exactly what I have right here.
Yeah. Because my heart breaks for each person, and my heart breaks for their families and for Enrique's family. When you have those moments of silence and you think about them getting that news, I mean, it's just, it really weighs heavy on my heart. And, you know, we need to be out there to make sure that the truth is told, that these people are held accountable, which means they need to be head on out of that office, because they're not, these are wholly inadequate investigations, and our tax dollars are paying for it, and they got to go. They have to go. And we have to make sure that this doesn't happen to other people.
And I met Mizzy. Mizzy is amazing. I went to a standout that she had, and we were in the rain for 3 hours, and we were out there just holding our signs, you know, and she's amazing. I told her how amazing she was in person, because she's definitely doing such a big part in, again, bringing awareness to what's happening in Norfolk County.
Absolutely. Pia suggests, when we're talking about how could this best be adjudicated or sorted out in Massachusetts and Attorney General's office, and Pia said, all political, can we just focus on the individual cases? I'm not sure whether that's possible when there's all these interwoven, enmeshed bad actors who are, you know, parts of the organizations that need to be policed, for want of a better term.
Well, yeah.
No, you go ahead, Jen. I'll wait for you.
You know, each of these cases with Sandra Birchmore and Officer John O'Keefe and Justin's are all very different. And yes, I believe that we can still be exploring and sharing those differences, but what brings us together and what ties this together is looking at the same Norfolk District Attorney's Office and these very same investigators. And what does that say? It says something bigger than just one case.
It sure does.
That's what we have to stop.
It sure does. And kind of my point, I actually like this, because now that looking at the poster behind BEATRIZ, we see Enrique on the poster. And so I often think about this, where we have this cluster of cases in Norfolk County, and it just happens to be where we have the best information about the similarities and about the investigators in these cases, and we can see how things are tied through. And I'll include Aiden Carney's case and his witness intimidation case, because we can look at each one of these cases and see things that they've done that are either suspicious or actually criminal, or all of these things. But when we start to expand, and there's a reason why we talk about this, because there's a common thread that runs through in Norfolk County, but not just there, because we expand over to Worcester and we see Enrique Delgado Garcia, and we look at his case. And how can you look at his case without looking back at the treatment of the Bish family from the Worcester District Attorney, where they won't share any information with them? So we're back to Molly Bish, and all of these things, while they all have their own separate individual interesting facts and moments that we can talk about. Like tonight, we're mainly talking about Justin's case. But when we look at the big picture, this strength in numbers and coming together and doing this is a movement, and it's not going to entirely be not political. It won't be partisan political, because the one thing that I love about this is that you have people from every political spectrum that are weighing in. And traditionally, I know from a politics standpoint that police accountability tends to be an issue of the left. It tends to be people who are more liberal in doing things like this. But something has changed in this country, because as the country becomes more politically polarized, people also look at this and start to say, you look at the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, it's totally political, and there are people that have much different opinions. But the interesting thing about it is that's a trial that people on the right look at that trial and they say, oh, this was a case of corruption where people were going after someone defending himself, right? And then now you have people on the right and left, even though they may not agree on any one of these cases, you have people on the right and the left that are starting to look at issues like corruption, like police accountability, like things that would not have happened a decade ago, definitely wouldn't have happened 2 decades ago. And now we really are, again, this push into social media and independent journalism, we really are able to talk about this regardless of what side of the political aisle you're on. And Karen Reed is probably the best example, because there are people on both sides of this case. I'm arguing with people every day that I know from watching their profiles and other posts that I probably agree with those people politically, but I don't agree with them about anything on this trial. And that actually is a positive sign to me, because we're not allowing our political polarization to get involved in this. And we're saying it doesn't matter what your background is. What matters is we can all look at this, we can find common ground in saying we don't agree with what's happening here, because the truth of the matter is it's not us against our political foes. It's us against a government that doesn't care whether we're Republicans or Democrats or independents or libertarians or whatever other kind of mode there is out there. It's us versus them. And it could be any one of us. Any one of us could be in any one of these cases at any moment.
I totally agree. And I'll add something else. You know, when we just recently found out about the 6-month investigation they did into rubber duckies, I mean, someone like Jen is completely, I mean, I remember we talked about it, and she was so upset because her brother got a 30-day investigation, and now rubber duckies, they have surveillance. They dug so deep into investigating that situation, but they don't do it for someone, who was executed by them. Like,
it's obscene, and everybody sees it. That's the thing. No longer are you pulling the wool over our eyes. We're here. We're talking about it today. We're going to talk about it on the 13th. Every single, Jen, I don't know if you've noticed, because I've seen you pop into some of the streams that I've been in, but every single stream I'm in, I will not leave the stream until I say one thing at least about the Juston Root case, because I want to talk about these cases. I don't want them to go away. I don't want people to, unfortunately, I'm sure as we move forward, we're going to add cases to this. I'm looking back, and now we're finding more cases in Norfolk County with the same type of behavior. People are bringing those to me every single day. I get my DMs. I wouldn't wish my DMs upon anybody, in terms of the in terms of the volume, but also in terms of the horrific stories I hear every single day. There are some days where I just shut it off. I can't look. I go watch YouTube videos on some entirely different subject, because to feel the pain of all these family members like you, Jen, and other people, not just in murders or police accountability, but domestic violence and sexual assault. I know that's your upcoming stream, Miss Shorty. It's heavy. This is heavy material, but together we can get through it, and together we can stand up. And that's what this stuff often gets overlooked, because people are like, I can't make a difference. But the truth, and I get mad, because in the comments and in the comment sections, when I'm talking about a case or I'm talking about the advocacy work I do, I'll get people responding and calling, oh, you're a hero, or you're God's gift to victims. Somebody said. Not only am I uncomfortable just receiving compliments in that vein, the part that I hate about it is that people are putting people like us up on a pedestal and saying you're special because you're doing this and you can do this. But the truth is that allows them to escape accountability too. Because the truth is all of you people in the audience who are watching and who are in the comments, you can all play a role in this. And that it's doing things like showing up on November 13th for a standout, if you can make it, at the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office from 2 to 5. That makes a difference. We can all help. And I don't expect everyone to do what I do. I don't expect everyone to have to read all of these stories and talk to all of these people and find them resources and help them navigate through this world. The sheer number of cases that I get are past the statute of limitations of people who've been carrying something with them for 30 years. And now they're telling their story to me because they just want someone to hear it and believe them and talk to them about it. It's insane. But I can help them by talking to them and finding them resources. There's one case of someone else that I'm working with now that something happened to them and they literally just want to have an education program put into the schools to help kids avoid it. They don't want to go back 30 years. They don't want vengeance. They don't want to destroy the person. What they want to do is they're inspired now and they want to find a way to help. And that's what I hope we're doing on November 13th and today, here, and every day when we're on YouTube and talking about these cases.
I'm just going to say from like a family member, seeing people come out and just being there, just be there. Just being there is just moving and it's connecting and it feels like people care. And, there's also just so many wonderful people. I mean, I've met BEATRIZ. We're just standing there talking and next thing you know, I'm like, yo, you're my girl. You know what I mean? So, anyway, I just think that it's an opportunity for everyone to come out. I think also the reason why and just so other people know too, that I'm a co-founder of Impacted Families with Anne-Marie. And, we have been in touch and kind of in our organization with hundreds of other impacted families, meaning that their loved one was killed by law enforcement. So I understand the enormity of the issues, and I know that it's not just to Norfolk District Attorney's Office, but what's very important is this focus, because there is a certain amount of people who still are like, oh, well, that was, they did that. Oh, Karen Reed, she's guilty, whatever. And then it's like, okay, well, here's Sandra Birchmore's case. You going to say that too? Oh, well, they just made some mistakes. Okay, well, now you have Juston Root. I mean, how many cases do we have to say? I just feel like there's more and more people who are coming on, and some people aren't ready for the enormity of the issue. And that's just, we're in an educational space right now where we just have to bring people into the know. And then we also have to give people kind of what they can do and what we can do moving forward. And one of the best things to do right now in this moment is to come out to a standout and we show the Norfolk District Attorney's Office we are going nowhere.
I think also in the chat there's been a number of people who said, I haven't heard about Juston's case. I haven't heard about Juston's story. I didn't realize there were these key players. So any time you see, this is advice based on Jess, what she's asked, what can people do other than standouts, is to, anytime you see Jen or BEATRIZ or Jason talking about Juston's story, whether it's here in a live stream, another live stream. I know Jen and BEATRIZ have been on Calling All Beings. I know Sean McDonough did a stream about Juston about a month ago, is to share out those live streams. Where in this YouTube corner of the world, share out the tweets, share out, retweet, share out the live streams and get more eyes on it. And then if people are able to come to standouts, they'll hear this message. So it's growing the awareness. And just like with Karen Reed, just like with Sandra Birchmore, with what Mizzy did. It's really about getting eyes on this, and then the movement can grow. That's
also, I have a petition that as of February, I changed it because I realized like the AG and the governor are not going to be doing anything, so I don't know why the letter's going to them. But it's now going to the U.S. Attorney Joshua Levy's office, the Massachusetts U.S. Attorney's office. So if you go into justonroot.com, the petition will come up and you can send that in. And if you're somebody who can't make it, or you're somewhere else, right? You don't live in Massachusetts or wherever it may be, hey, retweet, share, send letters. You can make phone calls too, so like all those things count. If everybody puts in like what they can, it amounts to a lot.
I think that, and to go back to what you said right before we read that comment, where there are people who look at this and they see Justin's case and maybe they don't agree. Like they may look at that and there are people that will walk away from this. We have a lot of people in this community who are very deferential to police, and they're even uncomfortable with discussing all these cases. Frankly, I get it in my DMs too. But at the end of the day, what I like about this coalition, and I like about this kind of, it's not an official coalition, but what I like about this working together that we have here is that there is something for everyone. Because if you can't get behind Justin's case, I don't agree with you, but I'm okay with people not agreeing. If you can't get behind Sandra's case, maybe you can get behind Karen's case, maybe you can get behind Enrique's case. There's something here for everyone. So it's okay if you don't agree with every aspect of what we're talking about. No one is asking you to sign a loyalty oath that you're going to support every single case we talk about or do this. I'm okay with that. But keep your eyes open and start to look around, because it really is, we're in an educational posture where people really are starting to look. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes something happening to someone you love. And sometimes it takes something happening to one of your friends or someone that in your town, for you to actually understand what's happening here. Because I was someone who was overly deferential to the police. I was someone who was in the situation where I said, oh, if the police have to, this is 30 years ago, but I would say, if the police have to knock somebody around a little bit to get it, whatever, like they're the good guys and the other people are the bad guys. And that's not how it works anymore. When you start to really look at these situations, what's happening throughout the world and throughout the country, life is more nuanced than black and white. So when you start to look at this, it's very possible to look at a situation like any one of these cases and say, even though I don't like to think this, or it goes against my normal beliefs, it's obvious that something went wrong in this case. And for me, it's all of these cases. But if it's just one of them for you, it's okay. Support what we're doing, because we're fighting for that one person as hard as we are for everybody else. We're fighting for you, really, for the people out there watching.
We're alive.
Yeah.
I mean, we're these they're dead, but we are out here. I mean, I'm out here. I mean, nothing's going to change. Justin's not coming back. He's not going to be at our dinner table for the holidays. My kids aren't going to have their uncle. They have their mom, who is totally always about, being an advocate and an activist. They've had their mom somewhat taken away from her fully always being present, because I'm in this mode, it's part of me. It's like in my blood now, where I'm like, it's not a question, are you doing this? I am doing this, and I'll be doing it now, I know, for the rest of my life. It's not like a case, or I'm going to go to trial and it's going to all go away. It's not going to go away, because what I know now, I can't unknow. Right?
It's a bit like the Matrix, right? So at the end of the Matrix, where suddenly you see all the ones and zeros flying by, and now you have this view. There is no turning back once you know. I agree with you 100%, and I'll commit. As long as you're going to do it, I'll do it. Let's say that. So you have a personal stake in this, and I'll just stand next to you. As long as you're going to do it, I'll be right there.
And I feel that when I talked with Anne-Marie about this too, I'm like, gosh, I never knew that the police investigated themselves until my brother was killed. And, she didn't either. So I was like, gosh, I feel like I didn't know this. And gosh, I didn't do anything. And, I wish I didn't wait for it to happen to me to know, but I just actually didn't know. I know people have busy lives. I mean, I'm raising kids, and it's just like, a lot of stuff going on, soccer, you're flying everywhere all the time, right? But now, I mean, obviously it happened, and now it's like right up there. But I want to just say that I really appreciate all the people who've come in and spent their time and everything that everyone is doing. It's just really beautiful. And it really, gives me more hope back into, community and for humanity. And, for a long time, I just felt like, nobody cared. And
well, we care.
I don't feel that way anymore.
we care.
Good. Can I just also say with your point, Jen, about you didn't know, so you can't know what you don't know. I think that I've talked about this before with regards to Karen Reid's case and the corruption, is that it's often hard for people to get their head around the cognitive dissonance, the disbelief that things like this are happening. You didn't know that the police investigate themselves. We didn't know. It's hard to fathom, even though nepotism and favoritism and stuff starts in children's sport and small groups and organizations where corruption starts at the grassroots, really. And so reminding people that it can go from those little things just in society to being epic kind of favoritism and turning a blind eye to things and then out and out, despicable corruption that's heavily affecting not just individuals and their families like you and like Juston, but all of Massachusetts. And if it's possible in Massachusetts, it's possible everywhere. So reminding people that there's not all sunshine and lollipops and everybody's abiding by the law, even within the law, that this can happen. So I think talking about these things opens up minds beyond, and of course, Justin's story and Sandra Birchmore's story are all very important as individuals and for the families, but bigger picture for society.
I think it's, as a Massachusetts native who now lives in Connecticut, a lot of my in real life friends have no idea what I'm doing, first of all. But when they find out, I get this question a lot, like, what are you doing? And why are you doing it in Boston? Like, there are things like that here in Connecticut, but you have all these cases that are out in Boston. And, I just take them where they come. But now I am more and more, as people, thanks to my being no longer being Haley Walbrecht and being Jason Broyles, not Haley Walbrecht, more and more people are kind of discovering that, oh, wow, you're doing this. And we didn't know anything about this. So now there are people down here that are talking about the Juston Root case, and they're talking about all of these things because that's what I talk about. And now there are people down here that are coming to me in my DMs, like the story I'm talking about that I'm working on in Hartford, that are saying, oh, wait, you have to look at this. So it really has kind of been eye-opening for me, from something that started kind of as a social experiment with my Haley Walbrecht account, to have come full circle and come into this world. There is this movement that's happening, and it is not constrained to Massachusetts, and it is not constrained to Norfolk County, as we see from our comment sections and as we see from our social media accounts. I mean, Shorty, you're in Australia. We're not. We're getting this kind of amazing reaction where people are responsive to this. People feel something about this. The desire for justice is universal, and we're really kind of tapping into those themes here with these cases. But instead of doing it from people watching it afar on Investigation Discovery or 48 Hours, people are discovering it within their own communities. And that's why what we're doing is important, because for every Juston Root before all of us knew about it, there's another case and another case and another case. And maybe it was a homeless person and nobody cared. Maybe it was this or that. As we're bringing this down to the social media level, we're doing it within our own communities, and people are starting to take notice, which is amazing.
It is. And can I just share a story with you real quick?
Yes.
I was at a Diwali party last week, one of my neighbors, and my other neighbor says, hey, Jen, I was at, her son's football game, and she said, I was talking to a friend of hers, another football mom, and they were talking about what shows they watch. And then it come to find out that her friend, I guess, she goes, I like to watch true crime shows. And then, to tell you the truth, really, I'm really obsessed with watching the Karen Reid case. And then she goes, and Sandra Birchmore. And then my neighbor goes, oh, that's really interesting. That's really interesting, because my neighbor, her brother, Juston Root, was killed. And she goes, oh, I know all about Juston Root. And I don't know, whatever it was, I just started crying, because I just thought, there are people who, it's been a long road, and I know there's still a very long road ahead. But it just was okay, the truth is coming out, and there's people, and I know all about the other parts too, of people who think they know the story, and people have different ways of justifying certain things, and that's okay. That's part of life. We're always not going to just be on the same page, but I think we can all be on the same page for justice and for accountability.
I was at a coffee shop today in Farmington, Connecticut, and there were people who were sitting at a table. I was there to pick up takeout, and they were talking about Turtle Boy, and I was standing there, and they're like, "Oh well, Turtle Boy, you know, you have this Karen Reed case," and they're talking about it, and I was standing 2 feet away from them, and my initial thing was I was going to say, "Hey, can I take a selfie with you real quick?" Because I was going to send it to him and say, "Hey, look what just happened here." But actually, I just sat back and I just kind of observed and kind of was in awe of like watching them talk about these cases that they were watching on the internet. And I almost didn't. The other thought was, hey, here's this picture of Turtle Boy and I at the Halloween party, you know, next to each other. But it was so nice because it wasn't about me, and it was just about watching the impact and the reach of these cases and what's happening. It's really, this couldn't have happened 10 years ago. It couldn't have.
No.
And we're in a time now in society where it's happening and it's beautiful. It really is I think people are missing that. People who don't know, people who aren't engaged in following us and doing this, they're kind of missing that this is a community. We've created a community here, and we get new members every single day, and that's what we're missing in society, right? Like, people don't know their neighbors. People don't know the people that live next door to them anymore. But now you have people who are talking about Justin's case all across the country, you know. So social media is different and in ways not necessarily better, but people are finding a way to come together, and that's what's special about this.
So wait, you were at the Halloween party? I was at the Halloween party. Were you in costume?
BEATRIZ, you're not the only one. I was one of the things that they like to call me as a meter maid, since they outed me, because I'm in the Bristol, Connecticut, essentially the parking authority. I think they call it the Board of Parking Supervisors here. I was newly appointed to that board prior to being exposed, and as Haley Walbrecht. And what I will say is that I have not even attended a single meeting, because in the summer they only meet every other month, because the only parking apparatus that we worry about in Bristol is a winter parking ban. And the first 2 meetings that I was scheduled to go to canceled because I didn't have anything on the agenda. So I've never been to a meeting, but they love to call me a meter maid online. I'm not sure how they got that, but I embraced it. So I went as a parking enforcement officer to the Halloween party.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't know, I didn't just miss you. I also missed, obviously, DJ from Calling All Beings. And I announced Turtle Boy. I ran the costume contest. I was promoting the 50/50. So I was definitely there.
Were you wearing like sunglasses? Not like
I was wearing glasses and a police cap and a safety vest.
Okay, I saw you. Okay, all right. I know exactly. I was on the dance floor the whole night, so.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I thought you looked
Girl,
familiar.
next year I'll be with you on that dance floor, because I love.
Yes.
I'll be there as well next year. So if you want to, definitely.
And hopefully next year is a celebration of everything that is, you know, hopefully Karen Reed is exonerated by that point, and it'll be a different type of celebration.
Yeah, we have to put the pressure on. We need justice for Officer John O'Keefe. I mean,
absolutely.
What I do like about that Halloween party was it was a celebration. It was not and I think that's a lot. Jen, what you said when we came onto the stream about how like people watch you on these streams and they're like, does she have any emotion about this? I noticed this the first time when I watched when you were on Calling All Beings, and I was in the comments there talking to you, and I noticed this eloquence that you have in talking about this, and I said to me, like, what a professional, like, look at her coming and doing this when this is all personal and she has feelings surrounding it, but it's more important to her to come out and be an advocate and kind of embrace this cause and celebrate Justin's life. You talked a lot more on that stream about who Justin was. We kind of went through it a lot of material tonight, but you talked a little bit more about who he was and about his music and about those things. And you just remind me of my sister. Like, my sister would be you. So everyone should want you as a sister, because you are doing it in such a beautiful way that you're memorializing his life. and that's what that Halloween party was for me there, which was we're celebrating these people and we're celebrating the accomplishments and we're celebrating the community that we all have. And we all need that too. We all need that too.
Well, there's a lot to be, to be celebrated and appreciated. And, sometimes when everything feels like it's piling in, I used to just say to myself, okay, listen, you have fixable problems. Okay. It's when you don't have problems you can't fix, and, you just get back to the basics. And I think, you can overcome a lot. I definitely feel like my brother handed this off to me. And that's actually the other part that really bothered me with talking to Andrea Campbell, because I said, my brother used to say, Jen gets it done. You give her a task, she can be on it, right? And she goes, I just got goosebumps because my brother used to say the same thing about me. And I just, to have those types of conversations with someone, and she lost her brother. She lost her brother in suspicious circumstances. Well, he was, I think, incarcerated. I don't know if he was incarcerated, but whatever, maybe in between something. But anyway, he died. And I'm like, from a sister. Anyway.
Well, actually, I'm glad you said that, because maybe what we need to do is reach out to Andrea and say, listen, we'll help get justice for your brother too. Like, we don't care, pay attention to this. Pay attention to what's happening here, because I really do. I'm kind of have these mixed feelings. Like, I really want to go out. I don't want to go out and bash them every day on social media. I do quite a bit, but I don't want to. What I want them to do is I want them to do something. I want them to act. And the only way that I know how, and the point that we're at right now, is to actually shame them into it. It doesn't appear to be working, right? They don't appear to care about the political calculus. But
I've done a lot, and they just, I'm kind of over being nice. I started to be nice, but now I'm not to be nice.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, you guys are just a bunch of word salad. Talk. You talk about accountability. You talk about all these other cases in the United States, Tyree Nichols, George Floyd, and you're not talking about my brother here in your front yard in Massachusetts. Like, how dare all of you? And that's why I have, like, you see we require real accountability, because that word, when Andrea Campbell says it out there, whatever, it means nothing. So I've added the real accountability and real transparency. Not this, like, politicians just kicking around words and giving us all this fake mumbo jumbo. I mean, we need real action. And I want to hear, like, literally what they are going to do, literally, with a time plan and with a follow-up.
A plan. Let's see a plan. Yeah.
A plan, though, with a time thing, because what happens is they do this, and she says, oh, we're going to have this police something accountability with her office. I'm like, that was over a year ago.
You never hear about it again. Yeah. It served its purpose already. That's the problem.
Press releases.
And on the website, justonroot.com, Jen, there's music that from Juston. There are 4 songs on that website that I actually listened to the other day, and what an amazing talent, and his voice. And it was, I mean, if you guys get a chance, definitely go to justonroot.com and listen to his music. It's on there. And it was awesome.
I've got that Juston's website, the website listed in the description box. So if anyone wants to go, and Adam's been dropping it in the chat as well. He just did then. Good man. It's a beautiful website. I'm going to spend a bit of time navigating around afterwards, because it's lovely.
And that's where the just one came from, because he would add me to the end of his name. And then he would say, we are just one. And it's funny, because every so often my kids and I, if I'm like, you're just like, oh, I just want one cookie, right? But then they look at me like, I'm like, it's everywhere. Don't worry.
I don't know if you knew, but I created a members only emote for in the chat for tonight. It's the picture of Juston that's right there on the screen, and it says Juston down the bottom and then just one up the top. It's beautiful.
I see it there. I love it.
Yeah. So we'll leave that in there for everybody to use to keep his in all of our streams, to make sure that we can keep his name and his just one alive in all of our live streams, because it's a really important His
All right,
memory
I'll
is
have to ask
important,
you
and this
after how I
this
download it.
bullshit is important to get thwarted. Beatriz, do you have any final thoughts? I'm mindful that I've had you all here for 2 hours, and it's been a really incredible conversation. I've personally got a lot out of it. I know Chat has. So, Beatriz, what would you like to say?
So I just want to say thank you for having us, and it's been nice getting to know you and emailing back and forth. And I just want to say that, Jen always yells at me when I say that, because I said, I just came to a standout. And she doesn't like when I say that, because, you do realize that one person can make a difference. I'm just a person who made a homemade sign, showed up at a Karen Reed standout. I've gone to Sandra Birchmore, Juston Root's standout that we had not too long ago. And, you can make a difference. And one person, you don't realize the power you have when you just one person, it can make a difference. But I was just going to say, I look forward to meeting, if you guys are in the area. Again, we got the standout on the 13th. I look forward to meeting you out there. Everybody's very friendly, just come up to us, say hello. And, it's a great, you do feel good, when you leave, because you've done something good, and we're not going to forget these people here. So thank you again for having us.
Absolute pleasure. Jason, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I this has been kind of my dream panel, because I've wanted to actually have a face-to-face conversation with Jen for a while. We've communicated a little bit over the period of time. I really get bogged down into how many cases that I talk about, and I get mad because a lot of the times I'll get sucked into the periphery of the players, and the Karen Reed case, and the Aiden Carney saga, and all of these things, because it is important to me when we have cases where people are wrongfully accused as well. That's one of my kind of platforms. But there are all these things that I want to get to, and I never seem to find the time. So I've been looking for an opportunity, which is why I jumped when I heard that they were coming on when I was talking to you last week, because that's an important case to me. Moore Stringer is another one that's going to be coming up in the near future. For me, it will be I have announced a couple of times that I will be creating a YouTube channel, and I will be launching it with a video on that case specifically. But I hope to do so much content on that, about Justin's story and about these other cases that we follow. And like Beatriz, I'm super excited about November 13th. I will be there from 2 to 5 at the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, because I think that for all of the people that need to hear from us out there, he's probably right at the top of that list. So I'm happy to be out there to share my voice. I'll be promoting it all week until next week, in order to get as many of my followers as well to show up there. And I just thank you so much for the opportunity, for letting me be here, and you, Jen, for this conversation and your advocacy, because you inspire me. So
absolutely, Jason.
To all of you. Thank you to all of you. This has, been I've wanted to have this happen for a very long time, and thank you. And I'll be there on the 13th of November, and I'll be pushing it out as much as I can every single day. And so will a lot of other people too. And that's what we're talking about. If you can't get there and you're in another state, that's what you can do. You can push out the word, and go on to Twitter. It's Juston Root, at Juston Root on Twitter. That was actually Justin's account. And so I just, but I didn't do Twitter. I used to go, I'm not doing that tweet stuff, just no. And then I'm like, oh shoot, he died. I know, I gotta do it for him. My senator then gave me her marketing person, and he spent an hour with me and taught me about Twitter and what to do, because I was like, I don't know about this stuff. So there we go. But go on to there, you can see like a picture. You can also go on to Sandra Birchmore's what is it called? The tweet, not the tweet, the name. Oh, handle, your handle.
There you go.
See, I don't even have to go down. Listen, have a show sometime, and I would love to come back where we can really dive into qualified immunity.
Yes.
This is the sort of stuff that really gets me, I get really into the qualified immunity. I get really into laws and getting involved in passing things, because there's a lot of jam locks going on in there. And what else? The medical civil rights act, just all these sorts of things where we can get deeper and also educate people, because once they know this, then that's where we're going to find the real change and shift.
I'm thinking I might reach out to Mr. Betterow. We are Facebook friends. I will reach out to him and see whether he might be interested in doing a panel with us. So
I definitely want to sign up for that one in advance. As well,
I'm there. You tell me. I'll make myself available, okay? Because I love watching him.
I met Mark, and I had a great time and a great conversation with him where he relayed to me that it was very interesting because a lot of these people, when we talk about the antis and the Karen Reed case and the kind of the connection to Aidan Carney's case, that a lot of these people got involved in this because they hate Aidan Carney, but I may be the only person that they hate more than him, so it was really interesting to me that his attorney told me that. And I said, that's great. And hopefully you'll arrest me if I get arrested for, hopefully you'll represent me if I get arrested for witness intimidation. Thanks for telling me.
Yeah.
All
that's
right. Well,
true,
thank
Mizzy.
you so much.
Was that Mizzy?
Yes.
Yeah. Police unions
Yes.
and the
For
contracts.
sure.
That's, yeah. Okay. I'm excited. All right, guys.
We'll park it. We'll do it in the next few weeks.
We're going to
yes.
come back later. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and good luck with the standout this week, right? The 13th. That's midweek.
Yeah.
Yes. I look forward to hearing all about it. Thank you so much. I'm going to say goodbye to my people here in chat, the shorties, but thank you, everybody.
Oh, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
I'll take you guys off one at a time. Hey, chat. Wow. I feel really honored. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you, Beatriz. And of course, thank you, Jason Broyles, for your time, your information, your insights, and the memories of Juston. Thank you, chat, for being here so much. What an important conversation. We're going to continue this conversation. As Adam said, I feel a series coming on. I put it up on the screen before. So, yes, we will do more on this because this is bigger than, of course, Juston's case is important. Of course, Officer John O'Keefe is important. Of course, Sandra Birchmer is important. But I think we need to talk about the bigger things as well, the umbrella of all of this. So thank you so much for being here also, Mizzy. What a treat. Thank you so much. And all of my shorties, I love your faces. If you are around in about 45 minutes, we'll be doing a Let's Talk live stream. Just me, just Shorty, solo, about sexual assault, sexual violence, and rape. A heavy one. I've dug myself in for this evening with some pretty heavy topics, but there are conversations that need to be had, right? So I just want to say also thank you to Larry Legend. I don't think he's here now, but thank you for the super chat. Also, Pass the Pepper, thank you. Robin and Hate Corruption became members. Thank you, Turd Ferguson, for the gifted memberships. Thank you all for being here. Love your faces. Don't forget to hit the like. Drop a comment after the stream has ended, and I'll maybe see you later, maybe tomorrow night. Brian Albert, we need to talk. Testimony review. Camp Shorty Weekend continues. Let's do it. Mwah.
Shows care and concern, broadcasting out of Melbourne. They've been streaming for a while, and they know they make us smile. He knew love from 8,000 miles away. 13,000 kilometers never got it away. Half a world apart, but united in the heart. 8,000 miles away. 13,000 kilometers never gotten away. Half a world apart, but united in the heart. Both are uniquely complex, bravely seeking what's next.